So my name is Sanjoy. I'm a product manager for the wired and the wireless portfolio, accompanied by Abi, who is the lead product manager for wired assurance, and Rajat, who is the proud product manager of the just announced EX4100. And if you guys are like, some of you may be wondering, why are we talking about a switch in a mobility field day? And Sujay set the context right this morning when he actually said that, obviously, other than the switches powering up the APs, there is a role that the switches play. And if you have looked at Sunalini and Bob and Jisheng's, the demos, there is a lot of user experience that is dependent on things outside of wireless that all of you are aware. We talk about mean time to innocence for wireless networks. And that is where the switch comes into play, especially when Marvis is at play, the user experience does not have to pay. And we are there to make your user experience great with a full stack offering. And 4100 is a step in the right direction. But before I get too ahead of myself, I wanted to put Jeff's marketing dollars into good use. Okay, great. So now let's get actually into the bread and butter of what the 4100 brings to the table, and along with wired assurance and Marvis, right? So the first and foremost, this is basically a switch born in the cloud era. So if you look at the Mist, how we do our assurance services, we are not there just monitoring switches, right? So when there is an issue around congestion or loops, or when there is an issue around port flaps, we want to be able to catch that, right? And these switches born in the cloud era, cloud native, they allow us the efficacy of data that Jisheng and his team can then mine to then correlate user problems, how much of that is contributed by wired or by something else in the network, right? Tied to that is flow visibility. Right now in the 4100, just like the 4400, which we announced last year, we have flow visibility. So which means that DOS signature attacks, egress and ingress monitors, real-time supported in hardware, also act as a vector in giving more data to cloud, with which we can do a lot more correlation. Talking about DOS signatures, another thing that we see in RFPs all the time is support or requirement to support MACsec for inter-switch communication. We have MACsec support on the 4100 natively for more security. The next thing that is coming up more and more in the campus networks is how do you actually do an L2 stretch, and within that, how do you do microsegmentation? The EX4100 supports EVPN-VXLAN fabrics, and we will get a little bit more detailed in the demo. But for now, this has support in hardware for VXLAN, and along with that, we also support GBP. That is a tag in the header for microsegmentation, especially in the context of proliferating IoT devices in the campus. You saw on the video plug about enhanced PoE, fast and perpetual PoE. So now your business critical and mission critical wired devices like HVAC or lighting, if they are connected to the switch, when the switch fails, the devices are still going to be receiving PoE. That's a very useful feature. And then last but not least, Wes did the expose on Wi-Fi 6E. Some of the Wi-Fi 6E APs you see on the market do require PoE++, right? 802.3 BT power. I mean, like, many of the devices like ours are probably right on the cusp of, like, 30 to 31 watts at full stream, right? Like, all 4 chains, all peripherals, like, Ethernet cranking at 5 gig. So if everything combined, we are at 30 watts, which, like, technically is just a wee bit above your 380 standard. 4100, like the 4400, is a PoE++ capable switch that we are introducing in our portfolio. So just a double click, and I don't want to spend too much time on this particular slide. It is a very versatile switch family, right? You basically see on the left, the high performance multi-gig PoE++ form factors, the different SKUs. And on the right, you are seeing the entry level for the value conscious deployments, some of the fixed form factors. And for fixed form factors, basically what that means is that, like, the PSU is fixed. It doesn't take a redundant PSU, right? So where does the 4100 slot in the whole lineup of a versatile Juniper distributed enterprise and a campus portfolio of switches? If you look at the lineup today, you have the 2300 fixed form factor going into the modular PoE++ offerings. The 4100F that we talked about slots right above the 2300 at very attractive price points. And then the 4100, the MGig and the PoE++ SKUs slot in between the 3400 and the 4300. And if you look at the next gen deployments for the distributed enterprise or for campus networks, we believe the 4100 and the 4400 collectively in access for all types of deployments, whether we are talking about just your standard deployments or with EVPN-VXLAN in the campus with different types of architecture, like, it gives you a wide range of deployment options from small to large in the access layer. Yes, Sam.
Are these required to be connected to the cloud, or can they be operated standalone with no cloud connectivity at all?
Right. Well, great question. So are they? So they are cloud native, but you do have the option to deploy them standalone. Obviously, understanding that when you're deploying them standalone, Marvis is not at play, and your user experience may pay. So any other question on the portfolio? And by the way, during the break or after the session, Rajat has actually a couple of these units lying there. If you want to touch and feel, have more questions, like, please feel free to do that.
So I guess follow up for Sam's question, is it different code between the two, or is it the same code? And
it's exactly the same code.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And you basically just need a wired assurance subscription to basically call home to the cloud and, like, get it adopted, and you'll be off to the races. Yes, sir.
Describe the difference between a cloud native switch and then a switch that I already have but can be managed in the cloud.
Correct. So as I kind of said, that we are not exactly just monitoring, right? We are basically providing assurance for end users. So Roel, the distinction that I will make is that for all of these switches, the new switches, especially with the hardware support for some of the things like flow telemetry data, these switches will have a higher data efficacy with which we'll be able to granularly spot problems better and faster, right? Now, pretty much the whole lineup of switches over here actually are supported by wired assurance, just that the 4400 and the 4100, the ones that we released in the last couple of years, just have that, like, extra oomph in them for us to be able to manage user experience better. Anything you'd like to add, Abhi?
Yeah, telemetry is key. The rate at which you get telemetry, the hardware supports flow-based telemetry. You can get better visibility to what exactly is happening, not only from a security standpoint, but also the rate at which you can actually see things happen on the screen. So telemetry makes a huge difference in us for Marvis to make better decisions, and that's the key difference.
So
that's a beautiful segue to my demo. So thank you for that plug, Sonalini. But before I go to my demo, any other question?
How does this extract telemetry impacts the actual performance of the switch? Like, do you see any cap when you start pushing a lot of traffic to the switch? Do you see any limitation in that?
So there's a clear separation of data plane and control plane.
Okay.
Your data plane is untouched. Your control plane is where you get management telemetry from. So the amount of traffic you push through the switch has no impedance on how much telemetry you would get. So they're fully separate.
Okay.
So let's basically just go into the demo. So what we are going to show in the demo, obviously this is a mobility field day, and anything without wireless is blasphemy. So what we are going to show is exactly what Sunalini said. From a cloud managed perspective, the onboarding experience, right? How do you basically onboard a switch? And in this particular example, if Wes has talked about our Wi-Fi 6E portfolio, we show an AP34 and an EX4100, both of them adopting to our cloud, inheriting the configuration, and then you're basically rolling, right? So day zero is really about your provisioning before you get into all of your deployment and operations, and that is what we show in the demo. So over here, the intent of the slide is to just point out that it is an AP34 along with an EX4100. That is the focus of the demo. Abhi stitched this together. So if you're familiar with the Mist onboarding process, we give an installer a Mist AI app. Every single device that we ship, gets shipped with a claim code and along with the serial number. And all you have to do from the app is scan the QR code, and then you can name the switch. That is what we are showing over here. And then you are going to assign the switch to a particular site, right? So that is as simple as it gets. The installer can do it. There are specific installer roles that allow them to use this app seamlessly. So at this point of time, when I have actually claimed the switch and assigned it to a site, it automatically appears on our site, but the status is disconnected. And that is because the switch hasn't yet been plugged in and connected to the internet. So now I'm going through the process of configuring a port, and we support dynamic port profile or dynamic port configuration. In this particular example, we are using the port profile for an access point. So anything on LLDP that has Mist in it, which is on our Mist access points, we are basically going to provision the port for that. And when that actually happens, you are pretty much almost ready to get both the switch and the access points connected. If you can roll on the video. So here what we are basically showing, you asked about cloud native role. So over here, you'll actually see that on the switch, there is an LED for the cloud, which is blinking. And this follows the exact same format as our access points, right? On our access points, we basically have blink codes. So depending on the state of the access point with respect to connectivity, link up, IP address, and all the 9 yards, that's the exact same sequence that these switches also will support, right? So there are blink codes. So now we are going to get ready. At this point of time, the switch is actually still disconnected, not been plugged in.
Go ahead.
Okay.
One key element about just addition about the blink codes, right? Our Mist APs, if you've seen, they're cloud managed. That would mean if they're up in the ceiling, but they're not working for whatever reason, it still communicates to its neighboring AP to tell you that the AP is down because it did not get an IP, or the Ethernet link is down, or it's not able to get to the DNS, without you having to make a site visit. Exact same constructs will be pushed to the 4100 world as well. Switches are cloud managed, but if they're dead in the water somewhere in the closet, do you have to make that 20-mile drive or walk all the way from to the closet, or maybe not? We can actually communicate the status of the switch to either a neighboring AP or a neighboring switch which is connected to the cloud, and give the information of, oh, this switch isn't up because it's the same 3 blinky lights, the IP address isn't there. Consistent. Good, Sam.
How do you learn things like management VLAN? Like some other competitors require your management VLAN to be 1 in order for all this cloud stuff to work. Do you overcome that, or is that a similar limitation?
Basic standard switching practices. Either you, if you have the ability for us to have a management VLAN as 1 for it to communicate to the cloud, that's okay. If not, your upstream switch, you apply a native VLAN, have a dedicated DHCP pool for that native VLAN, whatever that may be. And you can subsequently, as soon as it connects to the cloud, you have full flexibility for it to either get a separate management VLAN other than what you have already. And also, if you don't like DHCP management for switches, you can actually configure them to static as well. The only onboarding is just either with static or native.
Yeah. So at this point of time, I think we are at a stage where we are going to plug in the upstream, have this basically connected. Over here, you're seeing are we seeing the connectivity status here? So this is the AP. The AP is,
yeah.
So the switch just basically got on, the port profile got assigned, and you'll basically see the AP come in magically.
So the process that is seen in the switch insights, right? The switch went through the process of booting up. The switch went through zero-touch provisioning. All of these are provided as insights. The end goal of the story was we connected an AP. We brought up the switch. The deployment framework was for us to just plug the device in. The device went through the process of the entire boot up. Also understanding the connected device was an AP automatically, and that's why the dynamic profile assign came through. The AP got its profile. AP was already provisioned with the SSID, and you will see that the AP is beaconing the SSID with the right VLANs plumbed to it. So trying and avoiding the whole missing VLAN situation with dynamic port profiles.
So here is you're seeing the AP beaconing MFD demo, a test SSID. Okay. Abhi, I would love for you to actually talk about our EVPN-VXLAN support while I play this video.
Sure. 4100s not only act as just basic access switching, but also can be a part of your EVPN-VXLAN framework. EVPN-VXLAN, from a wired assurance perspective, we support 3 broad classifications of how you can bring devices on board: multi-homing, CRB, or even IP CLO. The most important part for the crowd here is the IP CLO is the feature wherein you can actually extend VXLAN all the way from your core to the access and bring in microsegmentation in play. And that is where 4100s come into picture. This particular example in here shows a very quick example of us being able to onboard 4100s as your access layer and also associate them to the fabric. From the point of configuration, it's pretty simple. You just add a simple click, add the existing device, the 4400, and the configurations that are necessary for the 4100 to be participating in the VXLAN fabric is all pushed down, and now your 4100 is part of the fabric.
Any questions so far? Yes,
So
Ro.
VXLAN now is completely GUI based and not CLI.
You can actually import the full blown deployment of EVPN-VXLAN with UI. That is correct.
So the last 1.5 minutes of this video is going to focus on generally, I think Avril earlier asked about third-party data ingestion, what we do with third-party switches. So obviously everything applies to Juniper switches, but if you have a wireless mesh deployment and you have a wired third-party deployment, you can always get a Marvis subscription to now see how we can basically give you the same insights from whatever we learn through the wireless network, right? So here is an example, you see the switches tab and a whole bunch of different metrics appearing up on top, version compliance, switch affinity, PoE compliance. I mean, as a proof point, one of our customers with 2,000 sites, in only 2 of them, they actually found a version mismatch, which means my rest of my universe is deployed on a particular version, but on these 2 sites, I have a version mismatch, and that is basically going to get highlighted, right?
And this is just us learning everything from the missed APs, and your connected switches could be any vendor, and we can still tell you those switches did not have the right version on them, and that's the message.
Right. And here, like, if you have an org level view, like, just like in wireless, you would actually go through all of the different SLEs for your wired network. And you can basically look at, like, things that are performing suboptimally, and you can hone in on them. So one of the things here that we are showing in the Juniper Networks campus with our wired and wireless deployment, the switch affinity. So what switch affinity means is, like, how many APs are actually connected on a switch, and where are those APs? So you have a location view as well, right? So in an ideal deployment, you are going to salt and pepper your access points on your switches. Why is that important? Because you control the blast radius for failure of a switch. Now, what happens when you, so this, for example, is a good example where two different switches, all the APs color-coded, are connected to two different switches sprinkled uniformly across the floor, right? If something different were to happen, and if you can just roll on to the other one, in this example, you show that we have two different switches on a different site, and all the floor APs covering the floor part of the floor are all on one switch. The remainder of the APs on a different section of the floor, all on a different switch. So what happens then is that you have a problem. If there is a switch outage, you are going to create a hole in one part of your floor, right? And that is why these metrics are important. These are basically the signals that we would give via Marvis for the network operators to act on. And if there's anything to be rectified, like, take the right action.
So the third-party switch insights, is all of that data or most of that data just coming from LLDP, or there are other features that switch has to have enabled?
Mostly, I think we look at the LLDP information and derive all of these insights from LLDP today.
Okay, so the more that switch is giving, the better.
That is correct. Yes,
okay.
That is correct. Right. The location view and the placement. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so sorry. One thing I just wanted to add to this entire discussion is just within the Fortune 10, we have, three of the largest networks within the Fortune 10. The smallest of them is about 30,000+ access points. All of them are now standardizing on our switching. They started with our Wi-Fi. And one of them now has 1,000 stores with us. Another one is standardized on EX switching. Another one is doing a 10,000 retail deployment with us with EX switching. And even in the enterprise side, if they buy our wireless, they're almost automatically switching to the EX portfolio from a switching perspective, right? So what I want you to walk away with is the reason we're talking about switching in MFD is we see this as an access network. Historically, wired and wireless, just because one vendor was selling them single throat to choke was what was the play. For us now, it is the single AI engine that connects wired and wireless. There are only two types of devices in our access networks. There are only two types of devices in our networks. They're either wireless devices or wired devices, and we provide AI for both of them, right? And so that's why we're excited about sort of bringing the 4100 to sort of complete the portfolio and bringing AI to wired and wireless. All of that sounds great. But my moral of the story here is we are seeing customer proof points. Brian Ward is at Dartmouth running campus, EX switching plus missed Wi-Fi. MIT, is headed there. A lot of the retailers are headed there. A lot of the enterprises service now, started with Wi-Fi, now going to switching and headed to SD-WAN with us. We are seeing proof point of AI adding value and customers seeing it and living it and actually, combining this wired wireless portfolio. So that's why we are excited about this piece of this. Sanjay and Abhi, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sudhir, for that commentary. Yes, April.
So I have a question to build on that, because it is quite exciting bringing it together, but your products do flow control, right? They look at the flow management, have visibility into flows within the switch. Are you starting to move towards an end-to-end quality of service flow in Marvis? So I can see over the radio link through to the switch, through to the rest of the network, and start managing end-to-end quality of service.
So today with the Marvis's story always has been client to cloud, trying to understand where the problem was. If you see today the question of troubleshoot application teams, for example, your team's call moves from your client, your access point, through your switch, and then WAN and outside. Throughout this portfolio, if there is congestion on the switch, for example, to your account, the telemetry that we get from the switches can actually indicate congestion, and we point that out in your client to cloud view to say the issue. And again, this is for us for the first personnel, the layer 1 tag that gets the tickets. For them, it should be as simple as asking about the person who complained, take the username and ask them why there is a problem. And we take data from wireless, wired, WAN, and if the issue in terms of wired is congestion, which is a QoS issue, we can actually bring that out to you and say congestion on this port is the same port that the client is connected to and passing traffic to, and that's the end goal. So taking the end-to-end flow and identifying where exactly the issue is.
Yeah.
And if I may just add, Avril, one other point to what Abhi articulately stated, cloud is the place where we stitch things together. So whether it's your routing policy, whether it's your security enforcement policy for segmentation, cloud is basically the orchestrator. So all the signals that we are actually getting into our cloud from these different components of the access network, cloud is a place where we converge, orchestrate, and write things back, whether you need to quarantine a device or whether we need to go look at a broadcast storm happening in the wired network, things of that nature. Right.
Yeah, I'd like to push back a little, if you wouldn't mind, because when you think, where your comment is, we're very focused on the client. Client is running an application. Client needs a certain level of quality of service to successfully do that. Congestion is important and a very important first step. But what I really want to see is, do I have quality of service end to end for my user experience?
Sure. Today we don't do it, right? And we need to do it, and we want to get there. I just want to answer straight that that is a path we need to head to, and we're getting there.